As you mentioned earlier, that getting for a visa is getting much easier.
Is it only full-time or part-time, or casual roles are also?
As long as it is 20 hours per week.
So this is about from the applicant side. What about the requirements from the business side?
So look, as long as the business is legit.
What about the future? What about the PR pathway?
So the answer to your $1 million question is that yes, there is a PR pathway. Those changes are now being implemented.
Getting 482 visa is much easier than ever before. Welcome to first episode of Migration Talks. We have received a lot of questions from you about subclass 482 visa. We'll be asking those questions on behalf of you to our migration agent, Vaibhav Patel, who has over a decade of experience. Welcome, Vaibhav, to Migration Talks.
Thank you very much, Jasmine. A pleasure to be here.
So one of the most frequently asked questions is the new occupations that have been added to the CSOL list. So we've been asked, a lot of you have been asking these questions, which occupations have been added to the new list. So Vaibhav, we have heard that new occupations like retail manager, office manager, flight attendants, etc. have been added to the new list and they will be eligible for the subclass 482 visa. Can you please share more information on
Sure.
this?
So as you mentioned earlier, that getting 482 visa is getting much easier. And previously there were a lot of red tapes on the occupation list. Even the criteria were basically comparatively higher than what it is today. So for example, let's say I've got a list of occupations that have been added, and I think this fits most of the student community actually, because let's say for example, as you mentioned, retail manager, a lot of students works in a petrol station, Hungry Jack's, even grocery stores and everything. There, if they've been working and managing the retail stores, they can easily apply for a retail manager. I'm in fact working with an IGA right now, and they're applying for one of their employee as a retail manager.
So someone, say for example, sorry to cut you, someone for example has worked as at Woolworths or say KFC, can they apply for the employee sponsored visa?
If they've been working as a store manager, yes, they can. For now, retail manager does include fast food chains as well. But eventually, because the Department of Home Affairs right now is referring to ANZ ESCO. So fast food managers falls under retail manager right now. But once the OSCA, which is the new occupation list for Australia, basically if that is introduced, so the codes for occupations will change eventually. And there the fast food managers have been transferred to a cafe and restaurant manager, which is no longer on the 482 list. So it's not always a good news, but most of it is a good news. So again, coming back to the point, let's say retail manager is one example. Then let's say office manager. There are a lot of people who works in the offices where they've been managing the entire operation of their office. They can also be sponsored as an office manager. Then childcare workers. We had plenty of people approaching us for a childcare worker sponsorship, but unfortunately it was only available in a regional occupation list. That means it was only available for 494. But now the good news is that you can apply even in Sydney, Melbourne and big metropolitan cities, exactly where there is a skill shortage of these people, because in big cities like Sydney and Melbourne, they really need a lot of childcare workers. We've been approached by a lot of employers actually when this occupation was not on the list and they wanted to sponsor their existing employees as a childcare worker, but they didn't really have much options. But now you can see that this has been added, so which is also good news. Then travel agency manager, travel consultant, and flight attendant, supply chain analyst. I've got a list of occupations actually. I can go on, like let's say content creator for marketing, cyber security related occupations, even penetration testers. Plenty of them are working in this field, where previously they just had one option to choose a software tester. Now there are multiple occupations within cyber security as well as software related field. Then there are a lot of occupations related to constructions that's been added as well, like draftsmen, and there were draftsmen before, but there have been more options in it now. Nursery person, which is more of like, let's say, where if you're working in nurseries, growing plants. Irrigation technicians, let's say if you're even working with landscape companies where you've been installing automatic irrigation systems, if you're working as an irrigation technician. Then graphics pre-press trades worker, where if you're working in, let's say, quick copy or similar kind of brands, you can also apply for it. Conveyancer, it was not on the list, which is there was only like if you're in the law background, you only had one option was solicitor, and a couple of more other occupations, but they were not really easy to get in to apply for a sponsorship. But now let's say conveyancer, a lot of companies dual conveyancers and people who graduate from law background, they also have an option for this one. Insurance agent, for example, has been also added. So there are a lot of occupations that has been added. And the best part of these changes is that previously you needed 2 years of full-time work experience. Now you only need 1 year of full-time work experience. Now this is huge. Why? Is because most of the students studies for 2 years.
Right.
And when they're studying, they work part-time at least.
Yes.
Let's say, for example, let's take an example of a retail manager. Someone's working in a grocery store as a retail manager, or let's say any convenience store down the street, So they can easily apply for work 482 visa after they complete their studies, because they would have studied 2 years, worked part-time. Now they've gained 1 year equivalent full-time work experience, which is now 2 years part-time is 1 year full-time.
Is it only full-time or part-time, or casual roles are also eligible?
As long as it is 20 hours per week,
Right.
we can count those work experience towards the 482 visa. And basically what it means is just you have to prove that you have worked 1 year full-time or equivalent.
Right.
So that's the biggest change.
Hmm.
You only need 1 year of work experience now.
So this is about the work experience. Thank you for sharing that information. I'm sure a lot of people had this myth that they need 2 years of experience, but now we know that either they need 1 year full-time or 2 years part-time, right? What about the qualifications? Do they necessarily need a relevant qualifications, or do they need a bachelor degree or diploma? Like how do people know what's their criteria and if they are eligible for 482 visa?
So basically you need to look at the occupation. Each occupation has a skill level. So if your occupation requires a diploma level for qualification, then it's diploma. And generally for a 482 visa, you need a relevant qualification and relevant work experience.
Right.
But we have seen many times that people don't have relevant qualification. Right? So in that case, what happens is generally if you meet additional criteria for that particular manager school, let's say for example, for a retail manager, what it says you need a diploma level of qualification, or you need 3 years of full-time work experience to substitute for a formal qualification. Now sometimes we come across a lot of software engineers, for example, they have got plenty of years of experience, but they don't have a qualification in IT.
Yes.
So in that case, what we say is if you have at least, let's say for an IT occupation, generally it's 5 years work experience will substitute for a formal qualification requirement. So it's not always necessary that you have to have a qualification relevant if you have enough work experience to substitute for a formal qualification requirement.
So that's definitely a good news for people who think they don't have a relevant qualification and cannot apply for a 482 visa. What about the English requirement? Do they need like a minimum 6 each, 7 each?
It's just 5. So,
Yeah.
It's not very hard to get the English code for 482 visa especially.
Yeah.
Yes, but when you're applying for a permanent visa, that's when you need at least 6 each.
So this is about from the applicant side. What about the requirements from the business side? So does the employer or the business, do they need to have a certain history, or like do they need to meet certain criteria? Do they have to be like financially strong, or they have to be, working, established a business since many years? So what are the requirements from a business side?
So look, as long as the business is legit, lawfully operating in Australia and has a genuine need for that position, and if they can justify that the business is financially viable, this is all they see. A lot of people ask this question that whether my business is only 3 months old, can I sponsor? Yes, you can. There is no requirement that your business has to be operating for so long or anything like that. Even the new businesses can sponsor. It's just that they have to provide a business plan and projection of their business, how they are thinking, because they don't have any established history of financial trading. So what they need to do is just show that this is what we are expecting in our business, and this is our expected turnover and sales and profits, etc. Right? So this all goes to the criteria basically. So if you ask me what are the criteria, it will probably fix all.
What about the future? What about the PR pathway from a 482 visa? Does this lead to permanent residency in Australia? I mean, that's the most coveted question that
It's
people
$1 million
ask.
question.
Yeah.
So yes, so the answer to your $1 million question is that yes, there is a PR pathway. So November 2023, the department changed a lot of things. Those changes are now being implemented in the current regime as well, which is that in November 2023, they announced that immediately from November 2023, people could apply for a 186 TRT stream, which is a permanent visa, after they've completed 2 years of work experience with the sponsoring entity, which used to be 3 years before. So the answer is yes, there is a PR. You simply need to work 2 years with the sponsor, and then 2 years later, the company can apply for 186 TRT stream. Now, 186 TRT stream has no relevance to the occupation list. That means there is no occupation list that relates to 160 RT. It means anybody who's on a 482 visa for any occupation can apply for 160 RT.
Thank you. That's good news also for people who've given so much of their time and hard work to the company and have worked for the company for 2 years, 4 years on a 482 visa, and they're definitely looking for sponsorship opportunities. So does that mean that then they will need to be sponsored again
Yes.
for a 186 TRT visa? And how is it different from the 186 direct entry visa?
So in 186 direct entry stream, you needed at least 3 years of full-time work experience. Your occupation has to be on the list which is now the core occupation list or core skill occupation list, which we call a CSOL. And you need 3 years of full-time work experience, a positive skill assessment, and 6 bench scenario. As a point of from the candidate's point of view. Right? And for employer, it doesn't really change much because it's the same thing that they're doing, applying for sponsorship for the employee.
So does that mean all these new occupations like retail managers, office managers who have at least 3 years of full-time work experience, they have a positive skills assessment? Can they apply for 186 direct entry?
Yes.
Oh,
So that's the good news. So it's not only getting 482 is easier, even getting permanent visa is easier.
So that's actually very good news for people who have those many years of experience and simply want to apply for their PR through the employer sponsorship stream, and also meet the Australian workforce requirements. So I think that's definitely a good news. So thank you for sharing that wonderful information. A lot of clients have been asking all these questions. I'm sure this video will definitely help them in order to understand the criteria and the requirement. And now can we also discuss about the process, like what is it that the clients need to do? What's the first step, step 2, step 3?
So the first thing is you need to speak to your employer, make sure that they're happy to sponsor you.
Yeah.
And if they're happy to sponsor, then there are 3 steps in total. 2 steps needs to be done by the employer, which is step 1 is company has to apply for a standard business sponsorship, where they have to prove that they're lawfully operating in Australia, where they simply have to provide their business registration documents and financial documents to prove this, that they're lawfully operating in Australia. It's fairly simple to get a sponsorship approval. The second step is applying for a nomination, where the company will have to first conduct a labour market testing and advertise the position and try to look for an Australian citizen for this particular role. Only if they cannot fulfill this position by an Australian citizen from that labour market test, then only they can sponsor the overseas worker. The second thing is company will have to provide employment agreement where minimum salary is $73,150. If you're getting less than this, you cannot be sponsored. That means you need to get a pay rise in order to qualify for this visa requirement or sponsorship requirement. The company will also have to provide financial documents in nomination stage as well to justify that they have an ability to pay the employee for next 2 years or 3 years for the period of the sponsorship. The company will also have to provide their organization chart and details about how their business operates, why do they need this position to be filled in, what efforts they put in to apply for to find a local person to fulfill this role, and then they have to justify that they couldn't find someone and therefore they decided to sponsor. This position is genuine within the business, fits within the scope of the business. That means you have to justify that the position fits in that business. Basically, let's say for example, we run a migration agency. We can't say I need a cook because even though I can justify the cook, but I cannot say that we need a cook because it's not our primary business activity. Same thing, accountant cannot sponsor, let's say for example, software engineer unless they have another revenue stream where they're building a software, right? So accounting firm would sponsor accountants. This is all in all, and then company will have to apply for a nomination. That's all doing all these things. Nomination would cost the company $330 plus the company has to pay something called SAF levy, which is $1,200 per year if the business turnover is less than 10 million, and if the business turnover is more than 10 million, they have to pay $1,800 per year. The step 3 is the visa application, which is on behalf of the applicant. So if you are an employer looking to sponsor your employee, you only have to do first 2 stages. The third step is done for the employee, which is the applicant. The applicant will have to prove that they have relevant skills and qualification, minimum 1 year of work experience requirement that we have already discussed. And apart from that, they need to have an IELTS score, they have to purchase a health insurance, complete the medical examination, police checks, and simply, they will get the visa for the duration of the nomination that their employer has applied for. And you do step 1, 2, 3, and done, and then you wait for an outcome. Once if you get sponsorship approval, the nomination approval, the visa is likely to be approved as long as you meet the criteria.
So that's good news as well. So that is some wonderful information that you've shared. A lot of clients have been asking all these questions, so I'm sure their questions have been asked and their concerns have been addressed. This was the first episode of our Migration Talks. We'll keep on bringing more episodes. We'll keep on answering more questions. If you have any more questions or you want to ask, you want us to discuss further topics, you can leave those in the comment section below, and then we will make an episode on this and hopefully try to answer all your questions. And that's what Aussizz Group has been doing since many years, helping all of you out in your visa journey.